G'day, it's Chris, the Guitar Amp Tech from Sydney, Australia here. Got a question for you, and I want to hear your answer. Put down in the comments below, which album inspired you to come running home from school when you were a kid? Put the vinyl on the turntable and just immerse yourself in your guitar heroes music. I'm going to share mine with you. If you're in Australia, you would surely know Kevin Borich. Great. Got to play with him twice. Doug Ford, just a legendary Australian guitar player. Live album, fantastic sound. Mr. Cool, love him. Sorry. I reckon probably you've all got a copy of this album. Huge inspiration. Loved his sound. In fact, the reason I've got a 63 brown face concert is because that's what he used on this album. Left us too soon, but man, what a mark did that young guy leave. Classic. You've probably all got it. If not, go get it if you can. The guy that looks over my workshop all day, every day, Mr. Hendrix. But there's one sound that has inspired me, and I've been in pursuit of this sound for my whole life. Pathetic, isn't it? Because when the guy recorded it, he was 20 years old. Really? Really, Eric? 20? I'm on the wrong side of 60 and I'm still after this sound. But, you know, you can only say someone's really obsessed when they've got more than one copy of the same thing. But when they've got, like, it's just a bit sad, really, isn't it? Silly old bugger. But why am I going through all this? Because we have, ta-da, a JTM-45. So, sadly, it doesn't work. Well, it sort of works. It says distortion and too low a volume. So we've got to try and figure out what that means. So we're going to do some tests and make this baby right. And you know what I'm going to do at the sound check, don't you? Out will come the Les Paul, plugging into that gem of an amp, and we'll be doing part of, until I botch it, a tune out of Blues Breaker album, the Beano album. So go grab yourself a coffee, hurry up, because I can't wait to start. She's a little bit dusty. Dust is good. It provides a nice warm blanket for all of our tubes. This is sarcastically. Now, this is a reissue of a JTM-45. And there's a few clues as to what its era it's trying to reissue. The fact that we've got two, well, 6L6s, but you know, they're meant to be 5881s, same these days. The early JTM-45s came out with 5881s, and then not long after they converted to KT66s. The original amp had 3 PreAmp tubes, but this one you'll see has got 4. So this one must be for the tremolo. And when we look at that front panel, we have volume 2, volume 1, treble, middle, bass, presence, and intensity and speed. So that is indeed our tremolo tube. Let's have a look on the other side. There's a few clues here that we can easily see about how this JTM-45 was greatly influenced by the Fender Bassman. And let's just have a look at a couple of them. So here we can see on V1 that these two cathodes are coupled together, go through an 820, which is quite a Fender-y sort of value when you have coupled cathodes. But look at this, 330 microfarad. Most Fender amps are 25 microfarad across the cathode capacitor. 330, and even that goes way down to something like 30-40 hertz. This is clearly designed to have the fundamental going way down, 5 hertz, something like that. So that's a clear clue as to its bass amp heritage. That's that fella there. So we wouldn't change it because it's part of the sound. But if you wanted to sort of get rid of that low end mushiness, you'd probably bring this up either to a Fender value of say 25, or go something, modern Marshalls are 0.68, so we wouldn't do that. But, say something like 4.7 microfarad, would be, tighten up that bottom end a lot. But we're not going to do that. What's another clue of its bass heritage? Okay, here we go. 0.1 coupling caps from the phase inverter to the tubes. And there's a 0.1 in the later Marshalls. I think the 2203 is 0.022 instead of 0.1. So a fifth of the capacitance. So it's going to choke out some of that low frequency to tighten it up. That's one thing that Marshall did more and more as time evolved, and as gain increased. You don't want to have gain and low end. It'll just turn to mush. So, but this isn't a 2203. This is my favorite. It's basically a hot rod bassman. All right, now the customer complained, distortion at a low volume. So let's plug it in and see what we see. Here's another little concession to modern times. We've got a FET. How do I know it's an FET and not a bipolar? Well, it says FET. That's my big clue. Otherwise, I'd have to look up the number. You wouldn't have found this in 1964. So that is probably part of the circuit for the tremolo. So here's the oscillator. You can always pick the oscillating tube because there's 3 capacitors in that loop between the control grid and the plate, and each capacitor sets up a phase difference. So you end up having intentionally oscillation happening in this tube. It goes into this other tube which is acting as a cathode follower, and this then goes into that FET as the final device that will control the oscillation. And here we have our little intensity knob, intensity control. And the way the tremolo works in this is it increases or decreases this volume. It's effective. Before we put those in, I just want to give these tubes a bit of a clean. I've got my patented, available on Amazon soon for $20 per cleaning cloth. I know to you it looks like an old stained tea towel with a hole in it, but it's not. It's designed so the tea towel, so the tube can be placed through the tea towel. You think I'm full of shit, I know. Look at that. Looks just like I bought one, don't it? There we go. Stick them in there. Get the next tube into my patented tube cleaning system. I think $20 is too cheap for this cloth. So the first thing we're going to test for is our plate current. We refer to our little ready reckoner on the Maxi Matcher for 6L6s these are. We want to see current between 12 and 40. This is the plate current, not the cathode current, which is plate plus screen. All right, That looks like it's settling down there to 23.1. Let's check the other tube. Boys and girls, overcurrent condition. I think we have already found the cause of the problem. It's a shame because it looks so nice and clean. That's so some idiot, aka me, doesn't reuse this one. You can keep this as a spare tube in case of an emergency. So I've now set it to transconductance, which I don't know if you can read that, but it says millimos. And a mo is the inverse of an ohm. So this tube here has got a transconductance of 2.02. We wanted to see over 2.2. So that tube hadn't failed, but certainly below spec. So gain is easier to understand in an op-amp. So let's have a look at that first. So VO, so the gain is VO over VN. Voltage, how much of the input voltage needs to change to get a voltage out. And in the case of a inverting amplifier, it's simply R2 over R1. So gain is a comparison of two like elements. In this case, the change in the output voltage divided by the change in the input voltage. That's our gain. Not that it matters, but for an inverting op-amp, that's simply R2 divided by R1. Not quite as easy on a tube because we're now controlling how much current is flowing by the amount of voltage that's on the control grid. The gain, quote unquote, we can't really call it gain because we're comparing two different things now. We're comparing current and voltage. Is going to be IP divided by V on the grid. Now when we see things like V and I, what are we thinking of? We're thinking of Ohm's law, right? So Mr. Ohm said V equals IR. Resistance is V divided by I, and that is ohms. But, that's actually the inverse. So the gain of an op-amp is actually I over V, which is 1 over R, which is 1 over an ohm, which is a MHO, it's a mho. So it's the inverse of resistance. So when we talk about the gain, or more correctly, the transconductance, is another term you might see, transconductance. You'll also see the term GM, same. That is comparing the output current, or plate current, to the control grid. And it's given in millimos, and it is the transconductance, or GM, which is a more correct way of saying the gain, because we're comparing two different things. Hope that made sense. All right, got a new set of JJs, matched by Apex, and let's see how close they are in their matching. So this one here has got a plate current of 20.1. Well, that's not too far from the original one. That's good. It means you may be able to use it as a spare. And 19.6. Wow, that's a very close match. I normally say anything within 10% is good, but 20.1 divided by 19.6 is 2.5%. That's a very good match. Well done, Mr. Apex. Let's check that transconductance. Remember, we want to see over 2.2, which is actually 2,200, but yeah, the designer couldn't get sufficient digits in there. Okay, so that's 3,170 millimos, and this one is 3,170. Well, you're never going to see a better match than that. But I will give him this one because he will be able to use that as an emergency spare. It'll be slightly hobbled because the gain, the transconductance, is significantly lower than these two new ones, but it may get him through a gig. I'm going to not cover those values. Because he should be able to see these values if he looks at the rear of the amp, although that's going to be a bit harder in this configuration, but I always like to have those facing towards the owner. Now we're going to check the filter capacitors for capacitance and ESR. So we don't blow up our ESR meter, let's just make sure we've got no voltage on these caps. Now this is why you have to be so careful working inside an amplifier. Even though we wanted to check this filter capacitor here right now, and it's potentially, well, it hasn't now because we just discharged it, but it could have 450 volts on there. So you've got to be very careful. But look at what is so close. So when I'm doing this, my finger could accidentally just lean over and touch brown, which is active, and that's 240 volts. So fortunately, despite opinions of those who know me, I'm not an idiot, and I have removed the power plug so I can't accidentally touch it. All right, now let's hook up the ESR meter. So we're going to go electrolytic capacitor. I want to measure it at 100 hertz. So I can adjust this up to whatever frequency I want. I want to do it at 100 hertz for Australia. So these are 50 plus 50 caps. So I want to see around about 2 ohms on my ESR. So here's the first section of this multi-cap can. See, now if someone was to measure that with just a plain capacitance meter, they'd say 50 microfarad and they go, it's okay. But look at the ESR. The maximum we want to see is 2. That's 2.75. That's, what, 37%, something like that, above its maximum. So that section, questionable. Let's see what this one's like. I'd let that one through. So that one's 2.05. This one was it? 2.7, wasn't it? Let's see what the other one is like. Now the other one's going to be harder to measure because it's underneath the circuit board. So we're going to have to find a convenient place to measure. So that's the capacitor we want to test next, or the half of the capacitor. So we're going to look for the junction of these two plate resistors, the 150K and the 100K. R31, here we go, R31. Fortunately, we can see the tracks through there, 50 microfarad. Wow, but look at that ESR value. That is way over. Let's check the other section. That's going to be at that 100, the one end of the 100K, or the easiest is to do the one that's connected just straight to the plate of V2. And that one, that section is, see, once again, you'd read that on a normal capacitance meter and you'd go, that's okay. but that's telling me it's not okay. As that ESR gets higher and higher as the capacitor deteriorates, the more internal heat it will generate. Heat is the enemy of electrolytic capacitors, and its death knell will now accelerate because of that high ESR. I'm thinking we'll change that one. We may as well change the other one. Probably hasn't been done since new, and it'll give it another 15 years of trouble-free life, so I think it's worthwhile doing it. Waiting for the other one. It's Saturday here. They'll probably fill that order and get it in the post on Monday. I've paid for express post, so I should have it here either Tuesday or Wednesday, and we can finish it off then. But in the meantime, let's put this one in. Now, I've removed the nuts from here. If we're lucky, this board will lift up enough so that I can access the solder joints here without stressing any of the wires. And while I have that board up, I would replace that 330 cathode cap and these two bias caps. So, fingers crossed. And no, I don't have enough slack. Bugger. All right, so I'm going to do the, I'll do that capacitor first, and then I'll come back and do that J-hook connection here, because I just want to see that I've done good connections here. I'll show you how I do this. Hopefully it may work for you. It's pretty much worked for me all the time on these Marshalls where the capacitor is hidden under the circuit board. There you go. Tell you what, new Marshall is a little bit stingier with their wire supply than vintage Marshall. Used to be no problem doing that. So what we're going to do is we're going to just replace these wires onto the new terminals of our new capacitor. And look at that, I reckon it's going to be a great fit. Stop cheering, guys, I haven't done it yet. Tell you what, Marshall, you've certainly cheapened up over the years. There used to be enough wire in here to do this replacement without having to pull the board, but now it is so tight it has to be, because an accountant said, can we save an inch of wire on each? Yes, that's good. Bend that lead around a bit. Get some mechanical support there as well. I'll give it a bit more flux. So tight, you bastard. But I got it. All right, Reds, where are you? I had a stent put in about a year ago, and for some reason they like you sort of semi-conscious during the procedure. And while he was doing his fine work, I was prattling away, as I do, and while I was telling him how similar electronics is, like this, to what he's doing, for some reason I found myself slipping more and more into unconsciousness. I couldn't figure out why. All right, well, that worked. So in you go. This is no thanks to you, new Marshall, old Fender, old Marshall, old Vox. They made it so that it could be repaired on the road by whoever had a multimeter and a soldering iron. And this is why I wanted to leave this board off. I just want to see, has that come through yet? No, it hasn't. I didn't really want to take that nut off because sometimes it can be a bit of a bugger to get back on. But that has to come off. Anyway, got him. Now, let's see if I can get this nut back on before I lose my nut. Good. Now I'll just get that depth exactly right. And that's him just there. Right, fans, now you can cheer. That disgusting slobbering sound you can hear in the background isn't my lunch, no. It is Harley, my ever-present guardian. He's brought in his latest toy and slopping it around into some salivary nightmare. Alright, I'm going to have to replace these from above. Okay, let's trim this old cathode bypass cap out. So I've given myself as much lead length as I can there. Just straighten it up a bit. There's a Vichy brand, an excellent quality brand. Now once again we're going to insert this so that the value of capacitance and operating voltage or maximum operating voltage can be read from above by the next stamp tech. So don't make a liar out of me, but I reckon it should fit pretty well. Maybe a bit wide. Let's have a look. No, perfect. And I'll just tighten that little clamp around there to give us a bit of mechanical strength. And that ain't going nowhere. Now, where's my little flux pen? Solder. Solder. S-O-L. I want to do this with a fairly hot iron because I want to get this over and done with before the solder on the pad below is compromised. I like that. That's a good job. Oh, thank you. You're welcome. We're going to do the same thing to both of those, and because it's going to be the identical thing, you can just watch the final product. You don't need to watch the boring bit. They've taken the tap for the bias of the same thing as the HT. And then it gets halfway rectified by that diode there. And the first stage of filtering is this 10 microfarad. And this is sort of like a pi filter, I guess you'd call it. And that's our bias adjustment. So call me a rebel, call me an outlander. You're a rebel, you're an outlander. But I'm going to change these values. I'm going to make that one, the one after, the one closest to the output valves. I'm going to make that a 20 microfarad, so it's going to have better filtering, more stable bias, and I'll still keep a 10 microfarad on the first stage, so it'll charge up nice and quickly. All right, let's get that done. Okay, quick recap. So the tube tester found one tube that had failed, the other one which was below the minimum level, but still working. So I've got a nicely matched pair to go in. I've replaced one of the dual can filter caps, which is living under there. I replaced the cathode bypass capacitor here with another 330 microfarad. Very large. It's going to give us lots of bottom end, which we quite often don't need. If it was mine, I would have modified this, but I'm going to keep this exactly stock for the customer. I also replaced the two bias capacitors. This one I left stock at 10 microfarad. This one, as I quite often do, I increase that to improve its filtering and stability. I doubled that value to 22, and I'm waiting on the other dual cap can, which will probably be here Tuesday, Wednesday, in a couple of days. So we're going to give all of these pots a service, all of the sockets a service, and the tube base pin sockets, we'll give those a clean as well. And then we'll plug in the new tubes, bias it up, and that should be job done. And I can't wait to hear it. But have to be patient for another couple of days. Whenever I have installed new major filter caps, I always bring the voltage up slowly on the variac. You don't know how long these things have been sleeping, and we just want to wake them up a little bit gently. So we're on 44, so I'll put both of these in play mode, standby on, power on, and let's just, have I got the rectifier tubes in? So we're not going to expect to see anything too soon, because remember, the rectifier tube isn't going to start working straight away. If it was a solid state rectifier, it would probably already be doing something. I've got 72 volts on the primary. My power light's coming on. So that the rectifier needs 5 volts to power it. So it won't be seeing 5 volts yet. I'm on about 90 volts. We're going to hit at 240 for Australia, of course. So we would have less than 5 volts. Less than probably 2 volts on the filament right now. Okay, we're halfway there. So we should start seeing the rectifier come online. And yes, it's 160 volts on the fuse, which is a B+. Okay, 120 volts. 372 on the B+, 240 there. That looks pretty good. Am I hearing something? Yeah, I am. What am I hearing? That's odd. I'm hearing a noise, sort of like a relay clicking on. I think it's the fuse holder. When I press that wire, that fuse connection back, it stops. When I release it, there's a clicking sound. That is odd. I'm wondering if that fuse is either corroded or not screwed in properly. So let me just power that off. And because I have seen it in the past where the inside of a fuse holder has been so badly corroded that we've had a connection issue. That's interesting. 25 volts on that side of the fuse. Nothing on that side. Ah. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a problem. Time to bring my problem-solving equipment out. Helps me think better. Alright, first thing, let's discharge this capacitor. Is that fully gone? Yes, fully gone. So there's definitely something happening with this fuse. Can see no sign of corrosion. It's a good brand of fuse. I like the little fuse brand. Let me just check this. I never trust a fuse, because sometimes the fuse wire breaks behind that cap and you can't see it and you think everything's all right, but it ain't. Yeah, looks all right. Wonder if it wasn't screwed in properly. All right. Take this off. You can see how many times I forget to take that off because I ended up putting a fuse in there. Because sometimes I'm just an idiot, forget to take off my shorting device, pop, burn another shorting device out because that's got a 100 ohm 10 watt resistor in there. So I put in a fuse, can't remember what value it is, probably half an amp, slow blow. Okay, we're seeing a voltage there. I'm not hearing any popping sounds anymore. I think the problem was the fuse wasn't screwed in far enough. It looks like it's pin 3. 438.8. The screen. 437. The grid, control grid -40. All right, I'm just going to do my quick test to check that all the preamp tubes are working. Is just check the cathodes, and if the cathodes are somewhere between 0.9 and 1.9, they're probably conducting just fine. Now this is a shared cathode on V1, 1.5. V2 there, 1.3. This one is just the one that's got the, I keep going to say common emitter, common cathode. Yeah, it is. That's 206. And this is going to be our phase inverter, so that's going to be higher as well. Okay, I'm happy with that. What I will do though, before I put those power tubes in, I'm going to bring that bias to the maximum negative voltage. In other words, to make it as cold as I can. And then I'll show you how I choose to do my biasing. I nearly always do it with the oscilloscope. I'm not a huge fan of biasing, or definitely not by voltage, although I've been proven how good Leo is. Sometimes I've done it my way and I've come up with -40 or -50 volts, I think the last time was, and the voltage on a schematic was -51. I think, Leo, how did you get to be so bloody good? So if I watch it on the oscilloscope, that is real. and I don't have to worry about what's my screen component, what's my plate component. What I'm seeing in the oscilloscope is real. And then I will double check it with the current that I'm measuring, the plate current that I measure. And if it is in the safe zone of the tube, and in most cases, I call the safe zone somewhere between 55% dissipation to 65%, sometimes even 70% really. But if it's somewhere between 55 and 65%, and it's what I'm seeing on the scope, that's what I go with. So I've just set it to the maximum cold, which I was yabbing too much, and I forgot to tell you what I saw. What was it? It was about -50, did we get to? Sorry, I keep hitting that camera with my head. It's a small camera, so it must be a big head. -47. All right, so I'm going to put the tubes in now, and then we're going to scope it and see where we find our best bias. Now I've installed both power tubes, and we've got the standby switch in play mode. I've got my signal generator coming in here on channel 1. I've got it set for 440 Hertz, which is the 5th fret on the high E string. And I've got it set to 200 millivolts, which would be like a Strat played loudly or a humbucker played quietly, so sort of a mid-range sort of level. And I'm now going to start taking up the volume control, and I expect to see a severe amount of crossover distortion on our display because I've set the bias control to maximum cold, the maximum negative number. All right, let's take it up and see what we find. Here we go. Increasing volume. And that's starting to look a bit weird. Ah, okay. That's looking very weird. What we're seeing here is one tube operating perfectly. The other tube doesn't even look like it's turning on to me. That's our 0 point here. And we can see it's amplifying a little bit into the other side. This is the effect of class AB. This is a little bit of class A we're seeing there. So there's always a bit of an overlap in our two tubes. I did a video on the difference between class A, class AB, and class B, and class D actually. So I'll put a link to that, have a look at that, and you'll see why we're getting this slight incursion into the other tube's zone. But clearly that tube's not going. So why is it so? Okay, first thing, let's check. Yeah, you can just turn off for a sec, have a bit of a break. Let's check. So these are our two coupling caps. These are our 220k mixing resistors, and this is what goes off to the control grids. So we're seeing -49 where we set it. -49. Okay. Let's look at the tube base as well. In fact, let's just have a look and see what's coming out of our phase inverter. Because it's possible that our phase inverter is not operating either. So let's get back to a signal. That's what's coming out of one leg of the phase inverter. And if this is operating properly, we should see the same signal but flipped 180 degrees. And we are. Positive, negative. Okay, so that shows that our phase inverter is okay. All right, so it's got to be either one of the brand new tubes I put in is kafuktā or something else is happening. So I think the first thing we're going to do is we're going to check our screen grid resistors. So here's the screen on one of those voltages. 430, that looks good. What's the plate? Plate's 429, screen is 430. Let's check the other tube. Plate is 432, a little bit higher. And the screen is 0. Huh. Let's check the other side of that resistor. $431 on that side. 0 on that side. We have got a failed screen grid resistor. Unusual. That happens, but not that common. And yeah, with our screen voltage 0, that tube is effectively shut down. I'll look in my spares box and see if I can find another 470 ohm resistor. Here's my 470 collection. I don't think we're going to need a 10 watter. This is a 5 watter. I wonder if I've got something with the same script as the other one. Ah, here we go. Ha ha! I'll put that one in, no one will know the difference. All right, I'll do that boring job and get back to you. All right, look at that. Perfect match, no one would know. All right, here we go. Wish me luck. Here's the screen of the new resistor. 429.7, yes. Perfect match with the other screen. I reckon it's going to work now. Okay, watch the monitor. Watch the oscilloscope, I mean. Look at that. Beautiful. Oh, okay, we're going to go to the next step. And that is, just there is 15 volts RMS. 15 squared divided by 8 is 28 watts. Yeah, I'd be expecting a little bit more, but we have got that bias quite cold. It'll probably come up a bit more. Let's just go right to there. So even on the coldest setting, we've got no crossover distortion. I'm happy to leave it there. But what I'll do now is I'm now going to check the current through the tubes and just see that that's in that 55 to 65% range. All right, I've connected my Eurotube bias checker onto the two power tubes. So this one is monitoring that power tube. This one is monitoring that power tube. And I just noticed that some fella put in some, what are they, 1%, 1 ohm resistors on the cathode of those tubes. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do a couple of things. We're going to see what the bias is, and we're also going to compare the plate current, which is coming through this, and the combined plate and screen current, which is going through the 1 ohm resistor. And the difference, if there is a difference, there should be, and the difference will be the screen current, because the cathode current is the screen current plus the plate current. Okay, we can see that they're very well matched, but we can also see that it's cold. Let me get my little bias chart so we can show you what we're aiming for. So these are 6L6s, and we've got roughly 425 volts. So we're aiming to see something around 42 milliamps. Notice how our plate voltage drops as our bias gets hotter. All right, let's just check this with the calculator. Where are you, calculator? So 414 volts times 0.045 amps is 18.6. Divide that by 30 watts, which is what a 6L6 can take, at 62%. All right, I'm going to just take that down a little bit more. Geez, the matching on these is great, isn't it? Look at that. Okay, increasing our input here. And I'm going to call it there, which is 16 volts, 32 watts. That'll do me. I'm now going to compare the plate current that we're seeing on the Eurotube, which is 40 milliamps, to the current, which is the combined plate and screen. So the combined plate and screen is 42.2 on that tube, 42.9 on that one. So it's an extra 2 milliamps of current. So let's divide 2 divided by 40. It's about 5%. I normally allow 6 to 8% for the screen, so that's about it. So some people get their knickers in a knot when you just measure the cathode current and go, oh yeah, that's going to throw the bias out. It is so close, it's not funny. The screen current is small compared to the plate current. We've just proven it there. It's 2 milliamps difference in 40 milliamps, so that's 5%. I think our work here is done. I've sprayed and cleaned all of the pots, cleaned all of the input jacks, the output jacks. I've cleaned the tube pin sockets, biased it. That's it. I think we're just going to put it back together. I reckon this thing's going to sound awesome. There it is. Eric Clapton, 20 years old, playing a JTM-45 with a Les Paul. It is the best sound on the planet. Oh yeah. And I'm about to prove to you that that Clapton tone with a beautiful Les Paul and a beautiful JTM-45 is actually in the hands of the player. And I'm probably going to get nowhere close, but I'm hoping there'll be enough between these two things to bring that sound back to life. So that's the album, all-time favourite. What'll we do? That one. I reckon it epitomises that beautiful Clapton tone, a song called Steppin' Out. I'll be using Doug. Doug is my 1971 Les Paul Custom, called Doug after just an astonishingly good Australian guitar player, Doug Ford of the Masters Apprentices. And you may remember from another video that I used this guitar. I went to Rod McQueen, the absolutely talented Australian pickup maker, who's very traditional. So yeah, I also have a great love for Lindy Fralin. Lindy does the traditional, but he's also creating new things. Whereas Rod McQueen, he really just wants to perfect the tradition. And I commissioned him a few years ago to make me a set of Path style pickups that he does so well. And I said, my goal is to get that Clapton Beano sound. And Rod famously said, I'll make you some pickups very close to his 1960 Les Paul, but I doubt if you're going to get the Clapton sound. Yep, that's Rod McQueen. But he makes beautiful pickups. So I've got it pointed to the centre of the cone, 90 degrees to the cone. Be even better if you could see through me. Then that's just going straight into my Zoom H4n. And then I'll put in my computer and get the levels and stuff all right. And hopefully I don't clip anything. So I've put my sound baffle thing on there. I've got some other acoustic treatment in the room, and this is mainly just to stop my neighbours shitting themselves when the volume goes through the roof. But I've got a feeling it's still going to be pretty damn loud. So you can check out my dB meter when I had the Super Lead, Marshall Super Lead here. I think it was on about volume 1.5, and that was clipping at 150 or hitting 115 dB. I'm going to run this one a lot harder because I'm trying to get that Clapton sound. And Clapton, I'm sure he was playing bridge pickup, wound back quite a lot, I'd say. Getting close. I'm going to go for a bit more presence. So I have got volume, I'm going into channel 1, and I've got treble on 8, basically the 3 o'clock position. I'll put middle at noon, bass at noon, presence at on 8 as well. This is volume on 3. Need to wind off a bit more. Too much. I think it's pretty close. He was 20 years old, a child, and he made a sound that made history. And so on this very happy note, I wish you farewell in this video. If you liked it, if you got something out of it, you know what to do. Do a subscribe. Any comments you put down there, I will answer everyone. And I'm going to see you at the next video. So look after yourself. Catch you soon.